Okay, so welcome back to the third video. So in this video we'll be creating some UI graphics, right? So we've already covered previous video, just looking at the interface and dragging and dropping in items from the toolbox into the hierarchy, and we had a play putting a cube in. Now this is going to be a bit more in depth, so we'll be creating some, like I said, some graphics using like the basic circle and rectangle. I'll show you how to combine these simple shapes to get a clean and professional looking UI from scratch. We'll just use built-in tools in Ventuz, so we won't import anything. And we'll give our design some personality, so we'll explore like basic materials, textures to add depth to the style of our geometry, and then finally we'll bring it to life with the mover nodes to create some smooth dynamic animations that will look that will make our graphics kind of stand out, more animated. So from here, let's get started. So going to Pinterest. Pinterest is a great tool. If you don't use Pinterest, I recommend it. As you can see, you type in something, you get a lot of examples and ideas. Great for mood boards and stuff like this, Anyway, enough of me waffling on. Let me just move this to the side. Okay, so what we're going to do is we got to pick something, right? I've done this previously in other videos. So we're going to build some elements. We're going to just pick a graphic and we're just going to start building elements as we see. So maybe something like this, and maybe we combine it with something else. I don't know. But let's get started and we'll create something just like this, right? So let's put this on the second monitor, and we're going to start with a new scene. So file, new. So now we have a new scene, as you can see, and we've got a new 3D layer right here. And what we want to do is start with the inner ring, right? So what we're going to do is go to world and drag this in and add an axis. Now, followed by the axis is a material. So this will be our color. So I'm going to go for a solid color. And then we of course need the geometry. Now, because this is a circular UI interface kind of thing we're building, we'll start with the circle. I'm going to scale this up in the scale all, something like this, nice and big, and we can place a hole. So like I said, everything has properties. So if we click on the circle and go to its properties, we can now put a hole in the circle, as you can see. So now we have this line. Okay, so I'm going to set this to 12. We can adjust the scale up and down as we go along. Now we're going to need multiple rings. So what you can do is you can actually copy and paste. So we're going to just copy and paste this. So Control C, Control V. So copy and paste, and now we have a second one in the exact same position. So we want to just make this slightly smaller, not too small, something like this. And under the circle properties on this, I'm going to change the angle like so. There we go. And of course I can change that thickness too. What we can do is now add these dots on the outside. All right, again, I'll copy this first ring, Control C, Control V, and then I'll scale this up, out. Right. Now, we're already going to jump into some materials, right? The reason I'm jumping into the materials for this is I want to create little dots. Now, there are lots of ways of doing this. You can do you can use textures, you can do, points, the actual sprites, which we're going to actually do now. So if you click on the material and you go over here on the right in the properties, you'll see there's a draw mode. And right now it's on inherit. So we want to change this to sprite. So find sprites, there's sprites, and then you get all these wonderful sprites. And if you change the scale, so bring it down, there we go. And if we go to the properties of the circle, we can now add this cool effect, kind of just using these are the vertices. So if I wanted to increase the number of points, I can just increase the tessellation on the geometry, which will add more sprites. So you can see the ring only has one. So if I add more, we're going to increase that. right? So you can play around with that. Just a cool effect, you know, really simple, not complicated. We're just adding some, you know, just some detail in there. All right. Now we're going to do this again. So I'm going to copy, paste. As you can see, really simple geometry. I haven't done anything too complicated or over the top. And this one, I'm going to scale up. Oh, wrong one. It is, I believe it's this one. Let's see. Yeah, this one. I'm going to bring this down. All right. Now we can name these if we want. We can start naming these or numbering them like 1, 2, 3. You can name them whatever you like. If you wanted to name this like dots, for example, this could be dot rings. Feel free to name your assets whatever you like, as I said. But I'm just kind of making this up as we go along. It does, as you can see, if I bring this across, it's not exactly the same. I'm not copying it like for like. I'm just kind of using it as a reference just to, you know, we'll build something. But you can, if you want, you can find something that you like and then just say, okay, I'm going to just try copy that from scratch. It's also a good way of practicing, you know, and getting what you want. But I like to kind of like combine the bits and bobs, you know. Just you have your own thing. All right. So we're going to expand this circle. We're going to make this one thicker. And then here on the opacity on this one, I'm going to bring it down slightly. Talking about opacity, I'll cover this now in terms of rendering and order, Z-sort order, and you know issues you may run into that you find. So if I'll fill this, I'll make this a solid circle for now, so you can see. Right now, it's transparent. Actually, let's put one. Let's grab an axis, put this all under one. So this is parented, right? If we was to rotate this, all right, and scale this up and down, it doesn't really show us that issue. Right now, you can see through it, right? Even though I placed this in front, it's in front of the graphic, you can see there's some depth. This plate, transparent plate, is in front. If I was to move this in my hierarchy to the top of the tree, you'll notice it doesn't render the objects behind. It cannot see through. So your hierarchy, if I rotate this, you can see. You see, this is, even though we have the opacity turned on, because of the way the hierarchy works, the Z draw, we have to order our hierarchy the same way. So if it's in the front, you bring it down to the bottom. Whatever's at the back stays at the back, is at the top. So you kind of build top to bottom. So top to bottom, back to front, if that makes sense. Hopefully that makes sense. For the Z sort ordering. You may notice as well clipping, if you may run into clipping issues. For example, if the graphics all share the same Z space, right now they're all in Z, you will see flickering or clipping. This is not very visible right now. Maybe if I could do a different color. There you go. That's a perfect example. So as you can see, there we go. We have clipping of the actual geometry. And that's just because we share in the same Z space. So if I was to move this behind, right at the back, and move this back in 1 point by 1 point, now, because that's off by 0.1 and everything else is at 0, this red ring does not clip anymore. So you need to be aware of like clipping. If you do run into issues with that, it is just because you're either sharing the same Z space or your draw order is slightly off. All right. So I'm going to scale this up and bring this transparency down. Something like this. All right. So let's copy number 4, and then this will be 5, which will sit above. All right. Boop. Actually, I can set that to 0.1. There we go. And I'll bring up the opacity on that. If I change the angle on this, start angle, You can see I can create separate little bands if I wanted, or the cool thing is we can go onto our texture, a material. Let's go to material stage here. If we click on the plus, we want to apply a base and alpha. So base is just the texture alone. Base and alpha, it's just combining them. So, you know, if you have a PNG, for example, or texture with some kind of transparency, this will use the alpha and base combined. You can use, of course, the alpha separately and the base texture separately too, or like just like any other 3D package if you've used it. We're going to go anyway, base and alpha. As you can see, it's still got an alpha. So I'm going to just reset that opacity right there. And what I'm going to do is go to on the loader. I'm going to use the pre-built-in 1D gradient, and I'll go for this white alpha ramp. Now you can see we've got this. It's faded here at the bottom, and you know it's linear. It's flat texture on this ring. If I was to close the hole, you'll see it's just a flat gradient, right? Now what we want is it to wrap with the ring. So we're going to click on the ring and we'll go to the circle. And what we're going to do is change the texture type to wrap. So now it wraps with the UV mapping. It's just basically a different type of UV mapping for this geometry, right? Geometry has options of flat and wrap. So we're just changing that. And then I'll put the hole back in, boom, like so. As you can see, it has an effect on the texture itself. Now we can play around with this texture. So we have UV mapping and we also have wrapping, right? But if we go here to the gradient and change this to turn this vertical off, right? And under simple, where it says simple, we're going to choose simple wrap. We want to wrap and repeat the texture. Then next we want to change that mapping, right? So we're going to go to UV, 2D mapping, UV 0. Now here, if we was to scale along the X, now we get repeated ramp texture. So now we've got this kind of cool staggered effect, you know, like steps almost. And of course, you can also play around with the, if you click on the 3 little dots, you can play around with the actual gradient itself. So if you want it, you know, maybe more faded out, you can do that too. So, you know, have a play around with that. You don't need to copy me exactly like I said. I'm just covering some of the basics, like so you can have something looking nice for your first, you know, first build. If it's the first time you're using Ventuz, you know, you can create something cool with just simple built-in tools and nothing too complicated, like I said. So as you can see, we only got really basic geometry, and we haven't created anything over the top or exciting, like crazy, right? And it's really simple asset. And if I change, like I said, you can change that UV mapping, and you can get all kinds of cool effects. Maybe we want only 3. And if I was to click on this axis, and then imagine this can be animating like this in one direction, for example, and then you have your other rings which animate in a different direction, you know. So you can have all sorts of movements, and then we can add depth and build up on top of this. All right. So that's one thing. So as you can see, we've built some elements, right? Let's kind of add some Z space. So let's use some of the depth, because right now we're just on like a flat plane. So let's bring these forward like so, and let's push this back, and maybe this one we're going to push back a tiny bit, and let's push this one forward. No, actually, let's push this. Yeah, let's push this forward, but we're going to change our Z sort, so because it has transparency there. There we go. So now we got some depth to our graphic, right? As you can see, you can tilt this and move this around. There we go. Really simple. Let's put some text in the middle, some digits. So we're just going to go to our axis. We're going to drop this in, and we're going to go to text. Now I'm going to use for this one, you can feel free to try the text 3D. I'm going to use the text 2D. All right, block text. I'm going to you can change the font. If you would like to change the font, click on this drop down, edit. It will scan your system for fonts, and then you can get any font on your system into Ventuz, into your project. So if there's a cool font that you want to use, feel free to just click on it, and you can just drop it in. Let's see what we have. I'll go for something like this. Right, this light font, hit OK. It says presets have been modified. Do you want to save it? I'll just say no for now. As you can see, the font's applied. Now the font, just like any other software, you can justify alignments, center. I want to center that. So now the text is centered. If you want to change what that says, put in a number. I'm going to start with 00. Right? Maybe you want it 25, 55, whatever you want. You can type in hello, whatever you like. It doesn't matter, right? It's your design. You do what you like. I'm just going to scale this up. All right. And like I said, I'm going to have this as digits. So I'll just put 00 for now. We'll change this in a second. Don't worry. But as you can see, we have as digits. Maybe this will count up or down or do something. It could be a counter, a loader. It could be whatever you want. Anyway, so we've kind of built simple graphics. As you can see, we've got some fonts, we've got some geometry. Let's add some color because it's kind of looking really pale. So now, as you know, we can see we've added these solid colors. And of course, you can choose to change each of these, individually if you want. Like I said, you can color this as you like as you go along, right? But you also have the option to apply a material to the entire thing. So it's one, they all inherit from there. So if I was to go solid color and change this to purple or red, or whatever it is, or orange, it doesn't matter. You can see the text is already inheriting the parent from up here because there's no material on this. I will put the solid color on. It now takes the material from this solid. If I want it still to inherit the material above, where it says no light, change this to inherit, and it inherits. So if I was to say, okay, all of these, I'll shift select these, select all the colors, right? Oh, it won't let me do them all the colors, but if we go to, I guess, the ones that are no light, so anything that's got no light, you can select and say inherit, boom. This one we've changed differently. So again, we have to just do the same thing, inherit, again, inherit. Now, everything here is inherited from this one texture, one material, So you can see the materials are still there. We still got the gradient, we still have that, but the color itself is just inherited. So you can still control stuff if you want doing that. If at one point or any point you want to say, oh, well, I don't want this one to inherit the color, like I said, you can go here. I could say no light, and I'll say, well, I want this to be a different color, and this is a lighter blue, right? And so on. Okay, so you can delete that. Anyway, I just wanted to give you an idea how it works and how you can layer stuff and you can stack multiple materials. For example, where you see this, where is it? Let's turn this off. Where is it? This ring. Let's just put this from inherit to no light, and let's give it a darker blue. There we go. So you see this material here. If I wanted to stack the same way we had a parent here, I could stack multiple materials on top. So I could stick another material here, and this could be red, for example, and this would inherit from here, for example. So if I said inherit now it's inheriting the material here, but then it still has its texture applied to it. If I was to say block that, make it inactive, as you can see, now we have a solid red ring because we're ignoring this material completely. We just bypassed it. Anyway, hopefully that makes a bit of sense. But yeah, experiment, play around with it, see what you can create, just using the built-in tools, like I said. Anyway, let's continue. So we have some kind of graphic here. It's not the most amazing or groundbreaking graphic, right? So let's add something a bit more interesting. Let's add some spreaders. So I'm going to get a world, an axis. We're going to go world tab, axis, and drop that in. I'm going to go here to geometry. Now, you can use anything. It doesn't matter. I'm going to let's make this like a bit more interesting. Let's use a cube, right? So we have a cube. And we want this cube to be offset, right? So I want the center of it to stay here, right? So if I move this here and rotate it on the Z, I want this axis to be here for this rotation. So to do this center pivot, if I go to rotation here, if I'll set this to, let's say minus 10.5, let's just round this up, minus 10.5. On the rotation center, if I was to turn the bounding box on, if I was to say, okay, the offset of this X is minus 10.5, so I want that center pivot to be 10.5, right? On the X, 10.5, which will now allow me to move this cube around the center pivot. So I'll figure out that distance and the center pivot. So now I can rotate this perfectly, right? So if you wanted, let me turn that bounding box off. So now we got this kind of cool cube that will, orbit around the graphic, right? Now you can see I can control that cube like this, right, from one axis. But say I want this cube to be spinning on a different axis alone. So what I could do is go to world, get an axis, and this axis here has its center pivot of the actual cube. So there's this our parent axis, which now can spin this direction or that direction, but then we can still control this and rotate it. So remember in the previous video, if you watched it, where we had the mover and we were spinning this cube, we can of course apply that to it. So if I click on the squiggly line, let's say on the Y, and we said, okay, clockwise, rotate, and we just had a slow animation, and that's slowly spinning. And then on this one, on the Z, I'm going to say counterclockwise. And if I right click, that will expand the values here of the mover. If you want to see the mover in the content window, right next to the reset button, there's a little gray arrow button here. Just click it and it'll pop that mover out. And of course, you can slow that down too. So now we're starting to go into basic animation with just movers, right? So if I increase this to, I don't know, 65, there we go, slow it down. But then this has a more movement to it. Maybe I want this a bit faster. So I can set this to 15, maybe 10. There we go. So now we have this cube that will just rotate around the graphic, while doing things. So let's add a spreader to this. So if it was to go here, let's place it in front, see what happens. Say no. And we rotate this on the Z. We're going to increase the count. There we go. So now we have more of these cubes that are kind of going around. So we need a few more to kind of fill the space, right? So let's say 25. Let's just increase the max count to 25. And then we'll adjust that rotation. There we go. And of course, if we change the scale all factor, get this kind of cool, you know, spirally effect if you want. You see, you can play around and you can get all these kind of crazy effects off of this one simple graphic. And we're just using the built-in tools. We're not doing anything more complicated, you know, as you can see. I can also choose to fade those if I want them to gradually fade out. You can do that too. The cube itself as well, don't forget, it has properties. You can make these rounded and they can be spheres. It can be beveled cubes, entirely up to you. It can be small or big. Right. You can see I can get all kinds of crazy designs just doing, you know, messing around. Okay, I'm going to reset that. Make these into small little dots. There we go. There you go. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, have a play. Perhaps you want something like this. There we go. And of course, you can rotate this, not this one. Let's rotate this on the X. There we go. Or the Y, or whatever it is. But yeah, hopefully that, you know, you get the idea. Anyway, so let's continue. So we already, like I said, we're already bringing in some animation. So let's get the numbers moving. So let's animate this with a mover as well. So if you go to the animation tab, mover. I'll try to not make this video, we'll try to make it too long, but you have something that you can kind of add to your build to get you started. Hopefully this is enough. This mover here, and what we're going to do is start from 0, and we're going to count up to 99. Right? You can do, if you want, you can go up to 100, you can go up to 1,000. You can set those values yourself, right? And we want an integer between this, right? Because we don't want to see the float value, so we want to just see like the digits. We don't want floats. So I'm going to go to logic, variables. You can see here you have float and integer. If I was to connect the text straight to the mover, we will have the float, but we want an integer, right? Which will round up the value. So if I was to take that and drop it onto the mover, you can see we have it counting, right? From 0 to 100. Right? And if I take this text and link it to the integer, now it's going crazy because the speed of the mover, right? We don't want it to go back and forth. We just want it to restart, and of course that duration. So you can choose how long you want it. If I said it's 25-second countdown, then it's 25 seconds. If I said it's 100, there we go. Now we've got 100. Yeah. So if you wanted to match that value, if you wanted to set, say, the 100 to 100 seconds, you know, you could do that too. It's entirely up to you, and that will count. And then once it gets to the end, or when it reaches its thing, once it reaches 100, it will just go back to 0, right? Or if you want, you can do it just once. So for example, if I change this to 10 and 10, if I hit nudge, it will count up to 10 and it will just stop, right? By just changing that mode here, you got this mode. So once it gets 10, it just stops. You've hit it. So you could use that as a countdown, rather than going from 0 to 10, you're going from 10 to 0. If I reset, so we start at 10. If we hit the nudge button on the mover, now it'll count down. You're doing your countdown animation to a launch or to a show starting, boom. And then you could have an animation happen or take the graphic out. There you go. So anyway, we created a simple counter. I'll just put this back to loops, but it will go back and forth. Let's just leave it looping back and forth, counting up and down. All right. And because it's so it doesn't distract us too much, I'll just slow down the speed of this changing. All right. Anyway, let's add some more graphics. So I'm going to actually do is copy this spreader, control, and just drag down. So control left click and drag down, or control and copy and paste. Control copy, control C, control V. And I'll keep this mover and I'll just add some rings to this. So I'm going to take this ring, not this ring here, this inner one, copy this and paste it and place it in front of the spreader, right? Now, with this spreader, if I change this position, the rotation and the scale, you can see we've got something a bit more cooler, right? Starting to get more, you know, I'm just building up the layers. I'm going to change that rotation and scale it up. All right, there we go. So we've got something, you know, we don't have this empty black space. Now we're filling it up with this entire graphic. And remember, if I scale this as well, so if I move the actual position in Z and rotate this, you can see, you know, we've got a lot of depth. I can choose to bring this forward or backwards. So maybe we bring these forwards like this. There you go. And you have a play around with, see what works, what doesn't, what you prefer. But you can choose how far that goes. That's quite, it's traveling quite a bit, but yeah, play around with that. You can reset that and then move that. There we go. Or maybe you want to completely go, you know, rotate that offset completely. Yeah, so don't be afraid to, you know, try different things and experiment. You know, maybe that's something you want to do, and then this just rotates in every direction. You know, like I said, it doesn't have to be what you see on screen. You know, it doesn't have to be flat. For now, I'll leave something like this, really simple, and it's easy to, you know. And of course, we can change the color. Remember, lighting mode, no light, and I'll give this a bluish tint. There we go. Okay, so we're about to end it here. So I would like you to add more movers to your graphics and animate them. I want you to, for example, like if you was to grab an axis, put it on this and get a mover, drop the mover. I want to see, like, get the rotation for the Z and then set some values, 360 to 0. And, you know, control that. You can see we've got this interface, right? Or this HUD and turn swing off. So it's always moving, but I want you to create your own graphics, animate them using just movers, nothing else, right? And see what you can create. As you can see, we've created something that's simple. I don't want to go too long. Like I said, it's already going into, we've already hit 30 minutes, but we've already created something with basic geometry. I'll add one more thing just to make it a bit more interesting, you know, to visually. So you got something more interesting in here. If you get an axis and a geometry, if you go to circle and make this big, like so. And what we're going to do is go to color, solid. And when we change the draw mode for the points, we're going to go to the same place, draw mode. We're going to do wireframe. And we're going to say, actually, we're going to do lines. Like so. And you're going to have a play with these. So you can have, let's say we want to front only, right? Then we're going to go to the tessellation of this, the sphere. We're going to bring this down so it's not, we don't have so many. There we go. And on top of that, we're going to go to our material, back to the standard. If you click here on the standard material tab, then you're going to go texture, not texture, you're going to go look for Perlin noise or vertex noise. Let's go Perlin noise. And you'll notice it kind of distorts this. If I was to drag this animation, we're distorting our vertices, right? Now I'm going to change that scale. So bring it down. Get this kind of crazy abstract distortion. And you can change that amount to how much you want. And now we've got this, you know, nice wireframe effect. You can make this big, small, entirely up to you, like I said. And just to add, we're going to go to the mover. I'm going to just click this. I'm going to say linear 1. And I'll play around with the speed. Maybe a bit quicker. Maybe make that max a bit more. There we go. But play around with it. Play around with settings. Add some stuff in there. Hopefully, so in the next video we'll cover animating these elements using keyframes, but for now I want you to try to animate these just using the movers. Add your own elements into this, so just click what happens if you add a torus into this, for example, or if you add a cylinder into your graphic, you know, what would it look like? I'm not going to show you this. I want you to experiment and try this for yourself. Try different materials on that, for example. As you can see, I just dropped in a sphere, right? And you know, you can play around with tessellation. Maybe you want loads, like I said, or maybe you don't want, you know, you want it like low poly. Depends on the look you want to go, right? So yeah. Anyway, have fun experimenting. Of course, you could change the color too. Right, and maybe I want to put this back in the Z. See, I'm going to be playing with this all day now. So let's push this back, and we're going to make this nice and big. And one last thing I want to do, opacity. Maybe actually I want to add a alpha to this. I'm on the loader. I want to use these existing materials. Boom, and drop this in. Play around with the 2D UV mapping and scale this down. Make sure the fonts. That doesn't matter. Don't worry about the mapping too much. I'll put this back to default. Put this back to default. But yeah, just play around. I'm kind of going a bit too far. I'll be adding stuff for days and make it, you know, adding more and more. But yeah, I want you to play around, add stuff, scale it up and down. Anyway, have a good night, good day, morning, evening, wherever you are. Thank you again. Enjoy the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if it was useful. I tried to go at a decent pace, not too fast, not too slow, so you know you can hopefully understand. And we built everything inside Ventuz, just using its inbuilt tools, right? We got this nice graphic. We didn't have to go into like Photoshop, After Effects, or any other place to do that. If you want to create one last thing, maybe I'll show you how to create something like that radar. Like if you wanted to add the radar on the outer ring, like I said, so that should cover us with texturing, basic geometry, movers. So I'm going to add a solid color, boop, geometry, circle. All right. So we have three things. Make this nice and big. Pull this forward. Go to color, texture, base with alpha. Remember here where we set the texture on the material, so we change that to wrap. So now that wraps the texture. And on the loader, we're going to use a 2D gradient, the 1D gradient, sorry. And we're just going to use the white ramp. We're going to change this vertical, turn it off, And there you go. As you can see, we now have this kind of radar. Now to get that effect, you can just change the angle. So if I turn this angle off, that reduce the angle, like so. So we have a slice, and I'll rotate this. Oh, rotate this on the Z. Make sure I bring this forward. Now we have a sweeping effect, all right? We're just using that simple gradient. Now you can adjust the gradient because maybe you want it a lot stronger. So go to the gradient here, go to the three dots and adjust to your needs, all right? And maybe something like this. And the color itself, we can say change that to a slight blue. There we go. So now we got this sweeping texture that you can add. Of course, you can still add the hole. So if you don't want the hole, if you want a hole in there, put a hole in it. And if I was to copy this, Control C, Control V, and move this slightly forward, and change the angle on the second one, and rotate this start angle. You know, you could have a, that hard line. You might have to change the opacity on that. Actually, let's get rid of the texture. So if you want to delete a texture, just hit delete. Boom. Let's go move that there. Now I want these two to be parented, so perhaps I'm going to drop that in here, reset these values. So then that will be in the right position. Oops. Sorry, I am extended this video longer than it needs to be. The hole, match that same hole. I wanted to change the angle. There we go. And rotate this more. Oops. Keep on changing the wrong Z. There you go. So now if I change this, not this one, this. See, we've got this hard edge here. You could, of course, do the hard edge at the top as well. And you can have that sweeping around on the mover. Right, so you can get the mover. Oop. Rotation Z. 0. 360. Turn the swing off. And move this forward. There we go. Like I said, play around with this. You don't have to copy this exactly the same. It can be whatever you like. So you can say, oh, okay, I want it from here. Entirely up to you. All right, let's end it here. Like I said, I'll be here forever. Maybe I want this in the back. It's just my preference. And I'll just adjust the hole. There we go. One last thing. If you're still here, go to effects on the layer. I'm going to go to effects. I'm going to just add a glare. Boom. Now you may see there's a slight glow there. I don't know how well you can see it on the stream, but I'll just make that. I'll just make that a little bit more extreme. So if I increase that diameter, perhaps I'll just increase the gain so you can see it a bit more. You can see it there on the text, but it has a bit of a glow to everything, right? If I bring that threshold, now you can see it affected everything. Bring the gain down and change that diameter. You can play around with these settings. Now you've got slight glow to it, but yeah, You can play around with adding effects yourself. Like I said, don't be afraid to play around with these. Experiment. I'll let you add some additional stuff yourself. Like I said, there's no wrong or right thing. Right. Don't be afraid to experiment. All right. Thank you again. Have a good day. Good night. Bye bye.